We are good to go.
All right, we'll see you.
Thanks, Robert.
Thank you. Good. Now we're ready to roll. There it is. The first part of security for this thing is simply putting the key in and taking it out. All right. Now, let's try again. Now we're on. And in fifth gear. All right. Let's see how this feels. If it feels a little soft to me, I'll go ahead and bring them up to 40 pounds. Which I'm thinking that's probably what I'm going to end up doing anyway. I like to run my tires at the maximum. Now, the Kendras that were on here said 60 pounds per square inch, but the inner tubes probably aren't rated for that much. I'd say the inner tubes probably don't want more than 30 pounds, 30 psi. But I think they could take the extra 5, get them up from 35. All right. Dave's suspicion about what's making the lumping noise and the performance issues is that it's the bearings in the rear wheel. Right now, I'm not hearing a lot of lumping coming out of them. So I think he may have dealt with that issue. In fact, I'm not hearing anything coming out of them. Some squeaking, but I'm not hearing the grinding. There it is. Much quieter than it had been. Yeah. The tires do feel a little soft. So I think I will definitely want to bring them up to 40 psi. There we go. Okay, so I had in mind a new channel to be called E-Trike Talk or Trike Talk or something like that. Really just dedicated to tricycle riders. Because I think as a I don't call myself elderly, but I'm definitely aging. I don't know. I'm older than 60, so that makes me an older American, according to the Older Americans Act. So, I think people my age who want to stay active, who've been avid bicycle riders, but who have any sort of a health issue that's moving them away from riding a bicycle, will become increasingly interested in riding tricycles. The first thing that I have to say about e-trikes, which is, I think, what's a good vehicle for seniors to ride, is it's going to cost you a little money, and it's going to take up a little room, and you're going to have to think about security. So, first we'll talk about money. So I have not seen any sort of an e-trike that I would want to buy offered for less than $2,000. Now, what I'm riding now, I think, is probably pretty much a Cadillac. What I wanted out of an e-trike was one that had a lot of cargo space, and that's what I've got. The Conductor Plus has a ton of cargo space. It also transforms into a rickshaw. I doubt that I will ever use that function, but it's nice to have it. But as far as cargo space goes, I think that this is the largest cargo space I've ever seen in a off-the-shelf tricycle. And this animal costs just around $4,000. And one of the reasons it was so pricey was I spent an extra $400 for the back battery, which is larger than the front battery. And I think that if you're going to buy an e-trike, go ahead and plan on laying out an extra $500 to get the second battery, because you never know when you're going to be really happy that you've got it. You're going to keep them both charged up. There have been plenty of times when I've been riding along and suddenly look down and realize I'm nearly out of battery power. So I'll talk a little bit about batteries in another post, but for right now, what I want to focus on is shopping for one. If mobility issues are driving you toward getting an e-trike, then you really need to shop for one that has a step-through configuration. That's really important. It was critical for me in shopping for a tricycle to get a step-through configuration. The first one I got didn't, and that was very nearly my downfall. And I ended up having to send that tricycle back, and that was a lesson that cost me nearly $1,000. Now, I have no problem with Go Bikes. They treated me well throughout our interactions, but it just was not the trike for me. And because it was too tall, and I'm a tall guy, but the trike was too tall, I couldn't mount it safely, couldn't dismount it safely, and I really had to have a step-through configuration. The Conductor Plus was my second choice, and it did have a step-through configuration. I considered several other trikes that were similar in construction. I think the only one that came close was the Max Foot. But the Conductor Plus won out largely because it could configure to a rickshaw, and because it has greater cargo capacity. It was a little bit more money, but in my mind, totally worth it. But I'm not trying to sell you any particular trike. I'm just telling you things that you want to think about in purchasing one. And you definitely want to step through configuration if mobility issues are any sort of a problem for you, or even if you think that they might become a problem in the future. For me, it's my knees. I had to shift to an e-bike from a standard bicycle because I could no longer get my leg up over the supporting bar of a standard bicycle, a bar that we call the sissy bar. Because in doing so, I was grinding my left knee into powder. So while you got to think of price, you need to get used to the fact that you're going to pay a little bit more for a tricycle than you will for a bicycle. It's a far more complicated machine. Now, if there are dealerships nearby you, it'd be a good idea to go and ride one of these things for a little while. I tried out the PedGo, which in a photograph looks a lot like this. What the photograph didn't tell me was that it was actually a considerably smaller tricycle, and I might as well have been trying to ride a big wheel. So it really made a difference just going to this. I think I'm going to pull over here and air up my tires. All right. Yeah, I'm just thinking that that's not really enough air. Everything's feeling soft to me. They feel hard to Dave. They feel soft to me. Let's at least make sure they're at 35. Okay. Let's bring it up to 37.5. Good. All right. Definitely a tool you want to keep in your tool bag, which my tool bag needs to be completely reorganized. It's gotten disorganized over the past couple of days and is sprawled into a couple of other bags. But such is the nature of the world. Entropy rules. There we go. Okay. Now, let's see if that feels a little more comfortable. 31 or whatever you had it at. didn't feel particularly comfortable to me. It felt a little soft under me. I like feeling the tires being nice and firm. Okay. Oh yeah, that feels much better. Yeah. Much better. All right. So, let's talk about air in the tires. As you can see, I carry a compressor with me. A trike is big enough that you could actually carry a pump, but I like having a compressor because it's just so much more exact. And I carry it with me, when I'm in my truck, or I have an e-bike as well as the e-trike. Oh, that feels so much more comfortable at 37.5. Much. I like having the tires nice and full. They're rated for 40 according to the tires. Got them at 37.5. I like having them pretty close to the highest, to the maximum PSI. It makes the ride you feel the road a little bit more. Your tires aren't going to cushion you if they're nice and hard like this, but it actually helps keep them from picking up glass and pebbles and stuff like that will work their way in and gradually degrade the tubes. So, just my little thoughts about air pressure. I think 37.5 PSI feels pretty good under me right now on this thing. So, talking about e-trikes and e-bikes, I've learned a few things over the years because I've had an e-bike for about 6 years now, and I've had this e-trike for about a year. And I decided, thank you, shortly after purchasing this e-trike, that I was going to keep my e-bike and ride it often enough that I wouldn't forget how to ride a bicycle. Because it turns out that riding a tricycle and riding a bicycle are very different experiences. And I hadn't ridden a tricycle since I'd been a toddler. I think I started riding a bicycle when I was 10. And so I've been riding a bicycle for 50 years. And you get used to riding a bicycle. And you get used to how you can turn on a bicycle. You see plenty of people riding with their hands off the handlebars. Because you don't ride a bicycle. Well, let me talk about something else right now. And that is going over bumps. You'll notice I'm doing it very slowly. And I do it very slowly because on a bicycle, you can go over bumps fast. All you have to do is kind of stand up on the pedals and let your thighs take the shock. But on a tricycle, you can't do that. The entire vehicle is going to flex over every single bump. And you just want to give it time to do that. You go over them fast, and you're going to throw stuff out of your cargo bay in the back. You're going to tear up the trike. It's not good for it to go fast over bumps. So when you come across tree root damage like what I just rolled over, you really want to slow down. And I'm going to talk a lot about slowing down on a tricycle. And I'm going to say this many, many times, often enough, hopefully, that it'll stick. The primary advantage of a bicycle over a tricycle is speed. Because you can pretty much go a consistent 20 miles an hour around curves, around pretty sharp corners, over rough terrain. Not a problem. The primary advantage of the tricycle over the bicycle is speed. Because if you get a bicycle going slower than 4 miles an hour, it's probably going to fall over. The tricycle, you don't have to go any speed at all. It'll remain stable. Which means that if you're in a situation where there's a lot of crowds, you gotta walk the bicycle. But on a tricycle, you can just go really slow. You can travel with the crowd. You have to take corners very slowly. And you have to take bumps slowly. But the advantage of the tricycle is you can do that. Now here's why you have to take corners slow. If you're going 20 miles an hour on a tricycle and you turn your wheel 90 degrees like this, you're going ass over tea kettle. And you do not want to end up with 200 pounds of tricycle on your back. That's a trip to the hospital. You fall over on your bike. I've fallen over on my bike many times, even my e-bike. I've dropped it on top of me many times. It's a 60-pound bike and it hurts, but it's never really seriously damaged me. Well, okay, one time, because I was stupid, and on a wet pavement, I went over a curb thinking I could land on the road and take off just like it was dry. Maybe if I'd been on a standard bicycle, I could have, but not on an e-bike. It hydroplaned, it went one way, I went another way. And when I woke up 3 minutes later, I was still laying there in the middle of the road. Fortunately, it was a road that cars don't often travel on. So it's easy to be stupid on a bicycle. It's also easy to be stupid on a tricycle. Don't be stupid on a tricycle. Slow down for bumps. Slow down to turn corners. And there's slow down for curves as well. I try not to take curves any faster than 8 miles an hour. Corners, I try to slow down to at least 6, sometimes 4, depending on the corner. And I do that for a number of reasons. Not just so that I won't tip over and go flying. The main reason I do that is because whenever you turn on a bicycle, you just lean and the entire machine arcs, it banks. Kind of like an airplane making a turn. The bicycle will bank. And so the bicycle doesn't take any stress at all, or hardly any stress on a turn. When you're turning a tricycle, whether you're going around a sharp corner or even a curve, like I'm getting ready to go around now, there's a bump. When you go around a curve, all of the stress of making that turn gets transmitted through the front wheel, up through the steering column, and that entire front end of the trike takes a lot of stress. And the faster you're going, the more stress it takes. And so if you're doing it really fast, the tire will take the stress, which will wear the tire down. The tube will take the stress, which will cause the tube to start to split and you'll lose tubes. You'll end up having to replace tubes on a regular basis. The wheel will take the stress, and so the wheel bearings will need to be repacked, re-greased, and possibly replaced, which gets more and more expensive. And the steering column will take the stress. which over time wears the steering column out. So the reason you don't take curves or corners fast on the tricycle isn't just because you don't want to fall over, which if you go really fast around a curve or a corner, that's possible. Ready? It's because you don't want to constantly be replacing your inner tube, which gets expensive. All right, new topic. We're talking about e-trikes and e-bikes. I was just talking about speed and how on an e-trike, you really don't want to go very fast unless you've got a nice straight path in front of you that's nice and smooth. So right now I'm doing about 15 miles an hour and I'm going to be slowing down a lot because there's some root damage to this trail. If I were on my bike, I'd be pumping 20 miles an hour straight across, wouldn't worry about a thing. It feels very different to ride one of these things too. When I first tried out the PegGo, which was just way too tiny for me, I couldn't figure out how to get the thing to go the direction I wanted to go because I was trying to ride it like you ride a bike. So I'd lean this way and the trike would go whichever way that the handlebars were pointed. And I'd lean this way and the trike would go whichever way the handlebars were pointed. You can lean all you want on a tricycle and you're not going to make any difference to what direction it's going. On a bicycle, that's how you turn. You turn with your body, which is why you can take your hands off the steering, off the handlebars. Do not do that on an e-trike. You'll notice I did that for just a second, and even with a brand new tire, brand new tube, and just adjusted. The handlebars started to shimmy. And they'll shimmy and they'll shake, and if you let it go too long, you won't be able to get control of the animal. And the handlebars will turn on you and you'll go ass over tea kettle. And end up with something like 150 pounds, 200 pounds of machine on top of you, which, as I said before, is a trip to the hospital. So while you may see bicyclists who go, look ma no hands, look ma no teeth, on a tricycle, it's more like look ma no hands, look ma no spine. Just don't do it. Always keep your hands on the handlebar on a tricycle. Now let's talk about batteries. When I was talking about shopping for an e-trike, I said that it's a good idea to go ahead and get the extra battery. It may cost an extra $400 or $500. It is well worth it. Here's why. If you're not used to e-trikes and e-bikes, if you're not used to power banks and lithium batteries in general, then you may not be aware of the way that their power curve works. The way that the power curve works on these things is that from 100% down to 80% takes a long time. You may ride for nearly an hour. And not see the battery drop well below 80% from 100%. However, once you're down to 80%, it starts to drain faster and faster. So from 80% down to 40% goes faster and faster as you get closer to 40. Once you're down to 40%, from 40% to dead is really, really quick. So if you're keeping an eye on your battery, on your battery situation, once you see it go down to 40%, you need to be either close to a stopping place where you can recharge the battery, no more than, say, 4 or 5 miles. Or, okay, you need to have another battery. And having a second battery on tricycle is going to be something that you're very glad of on a regular basis, especially if you ride long distance like I do. Now, I ride for lots of reasons. I ride because I need to get from A to B. So this is my primary commuting machine. Gets me to work and back. I ride straight through the winter, unless it's below 0 degrees or there's an inch or more of snow. I also ride for pleasure, which is why I started putting my rides, documenting my rides and putting them on YouTube. And now I have the Indie Night Rider channel, which is just gorgeous photography that I take riding at night through well-lighted areas usually, although sometimes not so well-lighted areas are part of the ride as well, and you just deal with darkness. But that's the nature of the beast. And so the Indie Night Rider channel is just beautiful photography. Riding is my primary form of exercise. And if you ride an e-trike for 20 miles, you'll realize that, yes, there is some exercise involved. Oh, wow, look at that. That is gorgeous. I also ride for pleasure. I mean, just look at this. Absolutely gorgeous. And I'm a musician, and I like to busk, which is to say I take my guitar or my mandolin, stick it in my cargo bay, and go right off somewhere, and then I sit there and play in public. And I often get videos of that. So I ride for a lot of reasons. So for me, the expense of owning one of these things and purchasing it and owning it is well worth it. And if you've lived a significant portion of your life on 2 wheels and you find that you really need to make it 3 wheels, I understand that a tricycle is going to cost a lot more than a bicycle. But in my opinion, it's well worth it. I also feel that keeping the bicycle and maintaining my skills on it, and of course it's a good backup vehicle as well, because sometimes this thing is down. Sometimes one or another of these vehicles will have a flat. Hopefully not quite so often on this thing anymore, since I upgraded the tires. And that's another thing about riding one of these things. If you're a lifestyle rider like I am, get the highest quality tires you can get the highest quality tubes you can get, and really, look for reliability, dependability, and quality in purchasing one of these. Now, if you don't have the massive cargo needs that I need, this may not be the trike for you. I know that there are Peg-Go for people who are not as big as I am. And there's other bikes like Maxfoot, Moonglow, and various others. And I'm going to reach out to the owners of all those companies and see if I can get them to talk about their products with me. I definitely want to start with Ash at OhWOW Cycles and Dave at Future Velo, because those are the guys that I do business with. But I want to try to get a cross section and give a fair representation of all the people who are in this business, because this may not be the right animal for you. Your needs may be different. I also want to try to interview as many tricycle users, starting with those in the Indianapolis area, as I can. I'm just now starting to see other people riding these things. I know I've seen at least 2 guys riding, both males, and both of whom appear to be older than me, but that's kind of hard to tell because, I don't look my age. And that takes an effort and some investment. So it's you can't necessarily tell somebody's age by looking at them, but both of these gentlemen appear to be older than me, probably considerably older. Now you'll notice I forsook the trail and I'm riding on the road. Here's why. The canal towpath will take me home. And at some point, relatively soon, I will jump on the canal towpath. But, and this is something about riding tricycles you need to keep in mind, there's a part of the canal towpath right just east of Meridian Street, where there's a gap between the gravel path and the concrete, where it leads right up to the intersection. Well, I went over that, or I tried to, and it whacked the derailleur. Now, I was still able to ride for a couple of days on the derailleur, but I did have to replace my derailleur, which is something I don't ever want to do again. So on a tricycle, you need to understand the clearance involved with the vehicle. On this particular tricycle, in first gear, you have less than an inch of clearance with that derailleur. Now, I generally ride with it in 7th gear, and that gives me about 3 inches of clearance. But 3 inches of clearance isn't a whole lot. And if you end up going over curbs or something like that, which you can do with kind of impunity with a bicycle if you're used to it, you can't do it with a trike, because that clearance is very unforgiving. On a bicycle, your derailleur is sitting right next to your wheel. So where the wheel goes, the derailleur goes with it. On a tricycle, that's not the case. The derailleur is in between the 2 rear tires. And so it's very easy to whack that derailleur. So you always have to be aware of the clearance issues with your tricycle. There's some ghosts, the Halloween decorations. So I don't particularly like riding in the street, but for this leg of this journey, it's necessary so that I can avoid that clearance issue that's on the Fall Creek Trail at Meridian Street, where it crosses Meridian Street. So you have to keep clearance in mind on a tricycle. And that's why, I can't ride in the snow if the snow's in deeper than an inch, because I don't want my derailleur dragging through the snow. Because, of course, you drag your derailleur through the snow, and you've just removed all the oil from your chain. Not to mention all the oil from the derailleur. Now I've got these new tires on. I'm just a little unfamiliar with how they're supposed to feel on turns. So I'm being a little conservative on my turns and on my curves. I'm going to get off and check the tire here in a bit once I get out of the street and back onto the trail. Which, fortunately, I don't have to follow the Fall Creek Trail. I keep saying Fall Creek, the canal towpath. I don't have to follow the canal towpath. And it's the canal towpath where it's got an issue at Meridian Street, not the Fall Creek Trail. Fall Creek Trail is fine. The canal towpath has an issue. It has a clearance issue on the east side of Meridian Street. Well, once I get this thing up on the canal towpath, I'll check the front tire and see how it feels to me. This is feeling a little soft. And I've become very sensitive to the ride on this thing and how it feels when it's going over things. You also learn to pay attention to your nose. And there's certain smells that tell you something's wrong. I remember one time I smelled something that smelled like hot plastic, and I knew I had a problem. Seconds later, the gearbox on this thing caught fire. I wish I had video of that. That was quite something. It only burned for a second. But what that was the battery router that balances power from the front battery to the rear battery burning itself out. And it turned out we had to get a heavier duty battery router. And so it took a little while for that part to be developed, tested, brought to market. Fortunately, the manufacturer helped me get through that. And I have had, I must say, about OhWOW cycles, that I've had a fantastic relationship with the manufacturer, who's in California. And I'm in Indiana. But I have been very pleased with their customer service and their level of support for their merchandise. So I can't speak to any other tricycle manufacturers. I think as they get bigger, you come to rely more on the dealership and less on the manufacturer. But it really makes a difference that these guys do support their product. Okay, I'm about to leave the road in favor of the trail, the canal towpath. And here we go. Onto the canal towpath. Well, actually, I'm on a sidewalk, but it leads to the canal towpath, which is right there. And I have a running coming my way. Alrighty. Okay. So, the nice thing about the canal towpath in this little section where it goes through Rocky Ripple is this paved section here isn't really part of the canal towpath, but it allows me to avoid the canal towpath, which is on the other side of the canal, and is a little too narrow to be riding this tricycle on. So here we go. So far so good, but I get up here, get a little distance from the road, and I'm gonna hop off and check my tire. Just see how it feels. Because it's unfamiliar to me, it's a new tire. Howdy. Okay, let's get up here and just get off and take a break. All right. Let's see how these tires feel. This feels like there's some give there. same amount of give. Howdy. Let's feel the front. Yeah, still feeling a little bit of give, but not too much. I don't know. I'll keep it at 37.5. I'm considering taking it up to 40. Let's see. I think I can shut this off now. Okay. And with that no longer juicing, I can unplug that. So I've got plenty of juice left on my front battery to get me home. And then I will juice these all the way up for service next week. Here we go. Okay. There we go. Yeah, it feels reasonably solid. I think what I'll want to do is check the tire pressure once I get home and make sure that it hasn't lost anything, because they still should be at or close to 37.5. Okay. So this will be one ride for my eponymous channel and several episodes with different photography for my new channel, Trike Talk, or E-Trike Talk, or whatever I call it. Because I want to talk about trikes. Now, the talks that I have about riding a tricycle, and there will be other things that I talk about as well. It'll just be general philosophy, and I typically talk about whatever's on my mind. And if I think that it's worthy of putting on a Trike Talk channel, I'll put it on the Trike Talk channel. Generally, I talk the entire time that I'm riding when I'm doing a video, which I don't do videos every time I ride. And so normally when I ride my bicycle or my tricycle, I'm not talking the entire time. I may talk a little bit to myself, usually out of frustration with something. But I don't generally talk all the time while I'm riding a tricycle or a bicycle, but I do when I'm shooting a video. And that's because I found that putting these videos on my channel, which I like to put documentaries about these trails on my channel, it seems like the ones where I'm talking, even when I'm just inane conversation, seem to be the ones that are more rewatchable. I've tried putting music under them, and that just didn't seem to work. I've tried just using natural sound, and I didn't particularly like that either. So that's why I'm going with this format. But now it's going to serve double duty, because I can chop these up into separate topics for the E-Trike channel. Coming up behind you. Thank you. Little dog. Well, not that little a dog. I guess that's a medium-sized dog. Howdy. Reasonably well behaved. Didn't jump and bark. Dogs sometimes get barky when I ride by. There we go. Okay, so this is the canal towpath. in fall. Look at the colors out here. It's one of the reasons I love to ride. Is I like to look at the scenery. And there's some beautiful scenery along the trails in Indianapolis. So this is actually inside Indianapolis. Completely inside the city limits. It was just beautiful following the canal. And we'll get up here a little ways. That bridge up there is leads to Butler University. And actually Butler University, I don't know if I can get pictures of the buildings that are way up on the left, on my left, on the east bank. But that's all Butler University. Great big buildings. Howdy. Okay. That's a pretty dog up there. Doesn't want to get out of the trail. Yeah, didn't quite grasp the concept. Okay, now. I was talking earlier about being aware of what you smell. So I know the smell of air escaping a tire. And I can tell right quick when one of my tires is going. Because I'll smell it. I'll smell the air from the tire. It'll come, it just has a certain rubbery smell that comes from the air having been in that tube. Another smell, as I was talking about, is electronics. I can smell when the electronics are going bad. And if your electronics are going bad, you get that smell, stop the bike and get off. And if you can, turn it off. You might be able to save whatever's getting ready to go. But you definitely want to be not on your bike when the electronics are burning their way out. Just, save your clothing. Don't get your pant leg burned. Don't get your leg burned. Howdy. Now, I don't know if I can show this, but where I'm riding right now, I've got the canal towpath on my left and the White River on my right. There's a lot of foliage here, but just right down through that foliage is the White River. Not much further from me than the canal. Let me see if I can find a break in the foliage and I'll stop. And I'm just not finding it. That's kind of a cool part of this ride. Just where you've got the river on one side and the canal on the other. Howdy. It goes on for quite a ways. You don't necessarily notice it because of all the foliage here that you can't really see the river through very easily. But I think there's a place up here where you can. Howdy. Thank you. All right. Oh, I get a bridge. I love riding on bridges with this Insta360 camera because I'll just warp the bridge like crazy. I love warping the bridge on my photography while editing. Coming up behind you. There we go. All right. It's just so much fun to do a 360 view on a bridge I can't resist just playing with what the camera and its software can do. Here we go. Whee! Stay woke. Recycle. Howdy. And I do love the scenery. Look at that. Okay. Getting close to where I included part of this ride in my video about the Virginia Fairbanks Park. Howdy. All right, I'm going to come around you. Okay. Now, look at that. Okay, so I think I'm all chalked out about tricycles, and I'll have more to say about tricycles and e-bikes and e-trikes later on. For now, I'm just going to enjoy this ride, because the last time I came through here, it didn't quite have the fall colors that I've got now. So I'm going to kind of focus on that. This is a different ride with different colors. And just look at that foliage on the other side of the canal from me. The leaf peepers go up to Vermont to look for this kind of stuff. Here I am in Indianapolis. It's right here in my backyard. I'm getting hungry. And I don't have any meat. I'm getting way hungry. I know my wife ordered some food. I'm going to have to figure out what to do to feed myself. All right. Wow, this is gorgeous. Just all the fall colors. Of course, somebody's mansion way up there. There are some mansions in Indianapolis. Once upon a time, I had a desire to live in a mansion. I don't really anymore. I'm pretty happy with where I am and what I've got. Wish I had a little bit more room for my studio, but there we go. Look at that. It's nice getting the reflection on the water, too. Wow, this is beautiful. And I was just talking with Dave, and he said, You know, after the first frost, most people stop riding. Well, not me. I just bundle up. These gloves are seriously good. You definitely want to, here we go back into talking. You definitely want to get some clothing that's appropriate for outdoor work. You know, so a nice jacket. I like this one because I can take the liner out and it's not quite so warm. And I put that liner in and this thing is very warm. So these gloves are motorcycle gloves, and I much prefer them over bicycle gloves. Bicycle gloves last about a month and a half on my hands and then they just shred. So I got some motorcycle gloves. I've got mountain climbing gloves in the pockets of this jacket, and they will keep my hands warm when it's 0 degrees outside. And they're made for climbing Mount Everest. They're wonderful. I love them. So they allow me to ride in cold weather, because the part of me that gets really cold in cold weather is my hands and my feet. My feet, I just put on a couple extra pair of socks, but I've also got some mountain climbing boots. So when it gets really cold and really nasty, mountain climbing boots, mountain climbing gloves, and a ski mask, and I'm good to go. Instead, I will ride the bicycle or the tricycle as long as it doesn't drop below 0 degrees. Now, at 0 degrees, some nasty things start happening to your batteries, because batteries essentially store heat. And when it's really cold outside and you're going to be parked outside, and I will talk about security at another time, securing your vehicle at another time, but I use 2 locks that are very different in nature, just to make it more difficult for somebody to try to get this thing, or my e-bike for that matter. I use 2 locks. But when it drops below 0 degrees, that cold weather will sap your battery. And so you'll think you've got enough battery power to get home, and you won't. And a frozen battery, which I've had that happen, a frozen battery doesn't want to recharge. And I actually had that happen with one of the batteries on this thing. The battery froze. And so I had to wait until the battery thawed out, which took several hours before it could even accept a charge. Now, fortunately, it didn't do any long-term damage to the battery, but it could very well have done it. So, but, you know, I am a cold weather rider, and it does get cold here in Indianapolis. Not horribly cold, but it will drop down to 0. Alrighty, and I'll end where I often end, with this little lending library. I got to remember to bring some books out here. This is how I've gotten rid of most of my books. Bring them here and leave them. People take them. Good.